Hello and welcome to the next in a series of webinars. The topic today, building insurance valuations. My name's David Parkinson, Technical Survey Manager at Ecclesiastical, and I'm joined by my colleague Claire Attenborough, one of our Principal Risk Management Surveyors. At the end of today's session, you'll be able to advise your customers on the things to think about when setting their building sums insured. You'll understand the importance of keeping building valuations up to date, and you'll have a wider appreciation of the ecclesiastical risk management offering. So, why is it so important to set an appropriate building sum insured? Well, not least to make sure that the building sum insured is adequate in the event of a loss, so that the policy performs in line with expectations. But we know from personal experience, from many years delivering valuations, that underinsurance is a widespread issue within the market. Many of our customers at the point of survey, we would identify underinsurance as an issue and put forward an appropriate reinstatement figure for them. In the current climate, we have the ongoing pandemic and, of course, Brexit, which are two factors that are influencing the adequacy of building valuation and building sums insured going forwards. Generally, we're seeing shortages in labour and skills within the construction industry, which is driving costs up, which makes it even more critical that sums insured selected for insurance purposes are adequate and reflect the current environment. On the same vein, in terms of the pandemic and pressures on business, there may be a temptation on the part of some policyholders to set a lower building sum insured with a view to saving premium. That is all well and good, of course, provided there's no loss. Not that we would encourage any policyholder to approach insurance cover on that basis, and I'm sure as brokers you would strongly echo and endorse that. But they may nonetheless see it as an opportunity without fully realising the implications of what they're doing, so that in the event of a major loss, there's a shortfall in the sum insured, and average may apply to the policy, resulting in a reduction in the claim settlement proportionate to the level of underinsurance. As well as consciously electing a lower sum insured, some customers may also, of course, subconsciously select or have an underinsured value for their buildings, possibly just through a lack of appreciation and understanding of the various features that need to be factored in when contemplating a reinstatement cost for their property. So why is it important to have an accurate sum insured? Well, we've touched on it already. It is about making sure that the sum insured is adequate, provides adequate protection under the policy, and that will provide peace of mind for the policyholder and for you as their advisor. The policy, in the event of a claim, will then perform in line with expectations. Average will not apply. And the claim process will be far smoother. There will be no delays reviewing adequacy of figures, and the business, the repairs can be carried out, and the business can quickly return or more quickly return to normal operations. So, in terms of type of valuations, we're talking about insurance reinstatement valuations today, but there are a number of different valuations that you might encounter. So market value, asset value, rental value, and rebuild are all different types of valuation. From a market value perspective, that's simply what is the current market value. So if you think about it in the context of selling a property, what is it worth? It doesn't relate to, in any shape or form, to the rebuild cost of a building. Factors like location, demand for property in the area will influence market value, but would have no bearing on the reinstatement rebuild cost. Asset value is simply the value that you would set against the property in terms of your financial accounts. So again, has no bearing to the reinstatement cost. And rental value would be exactly that, the revenue that you might derive from renting out property as a financial venture, rather than, again, the cost of rebuilding. So from an insurance point of view, as we've said, what we're interested in is the rebuild, the reinstatement cost for a property in the event of an insurable loss. And the valuations that Ecclesiastical provide, and have been doing so for many years, are calculated on the basis of repair, reinstatement or restoration of buildings using modern techniques and materials. So what do we mean by modern techniques and materials? Well, a good example might be a historic building with medieval oak timbers. In the event of a major loss, as you would appreciate, medieval oak timbers are not easy to come by. So we would be looking to support the repair, the reinstatement using modern green oak, which will, of course, age over time. So modern techniques and materials. If an exact replica of a building is required for insurance purposes, then that will fall outside the scope of what Ecclesiastical are able to offer, and your customers would need to seek professional advice on that basis. The valuation service that Ecclesiastical provide is a value add, so it's provided without additional charge. And as you can see from the next bullet point, if you had to pay someone to produce a valuation, the costs can be quite significant. It can run into the thousands of pounds, depending on the size of the exposure that you're looking at. So by way of an example, if we had a risk that was 150 million pounds, then the building valuation, the professional valuation for that property could easily come in the region of £25,000. So it is a significant value add as part of the proposition from Ecclesiastical, and it's available to customers, qualifying customers that meet our survey criteria. And where customers accept the valuation that's put forward by Ecclesiastical, we would waive the condition of average under the policy, provided the figure is maintained going forwards. So indexation is applied to the policy from the date of our valuation to keep pace with costs subsequently. And equally, if there are any major alterations or changes to the building, that the building sum insured is adjusted to reflect those changes. I'm now going to pass you over to my colleague, Claire Attenborough.
So just wanted to mention a couple of cases that we are aware of where there has been a significant amount of underinsurance, and there's been quite an impact on the customer as a result of that. So I'm looking firstly at a charity based in the southeast. Their building sum insured was something in the region of 400,000. A heavy storm claim, internal damage claim valued at around £50,000. Now, clearly the £400,000 sum insured was inadequate. In fact, it should have been closer to 1.2 million. So underinsured by around 2/3. The net result there was the cost of the customer was around £30,000. And clearly for a charity, they'd much rather be spending that £30,000 on the promotion of the good works that they would ordinarily be doing. And the second example there relates to a property owner's risk. Now, we did look at this case in around 2019, put a value of about £6 million against the building. We were told by the customer that they could recover VAT, so that £6 million didn't include any VAT. Now, the client didn't take our advice there. As it transpired, they weren't VAT registered, so they couldn't recover any VAT. So following their escape of water claim, they were left with a shortfall of around £60,000. Now, not many businesses will be able to withstand such a hit to their cash flow. So just some detail here about what Ecclesiastical can offer in the way of advising your customers with regard to their valuation, their sums insured. We've a couple of options where we don't actually visit the premises, but we look at aerial imagery. So we have a desktop valuation, which is simply looking at aerial imagery and research on the internet and so on. No customer contact, but we're able to give an indication of what we think the building should be insured for. A step up from that is the desktop assessment and valuation. Now that covers the risk management aspects as well as the valuation that we've just referenced. So there is a risk management discussion with the customer. It may incorporate a video capture call, which allows us to inspect particular areas, both from a risk management perspective and from the valuation perspective. And of course, we still have the traditional on-site survey, which some of you may be familiar with, risk management and valuation exercise. So this is where the surveyors visit the premises and will physically measure the buildings in order to produce a building's valuation advice. And just a plea, really, building plans are always helpful to us. So if your customer does have plans, we would be very grateful to receive them when we're on site. So I'm just going to move on to those areas of consideration for setting your client sum insured, things that they might need to consider just in relation to their particular premises. So just looking firstly at the age of the building, and if we make a distinction of sort of mid-18th century, so that's the Industrial Revolution. So prior to that time, any building structure is likely to be largely handmade, so handmade bricks, handmade tiles, and so on. The windows will be different sizes. Windows, doors, and so on will all be different. So it's not possible to just buy things off the shelf to replace those. Post-industrial revolution, that's when we started to see mass production, production lines, so things move into more standardized sizes. So that's a good distinction. If it's older than industrial revolution, then it's likely to be bespoke and will cost more. If we think about the location of the property, this is almost two sides of the same coin, really. So you could consider property in the Highlands of Scotland and compare it to a city centre location. So transport links to get to the Scottish risk, difficult to get there. Transport links not brilliant, but once you get there, plenty of room for site storage and so on. If you contrast that with the city centre location, transport great, but not very much room on site, so limited availability for site storage might mean that you need to get more deliveries more regularly. So both of those have their challenges. And then thinking about access to the site itself. So just looking at this image here, this clearly was not built with modern transport in mind. So modern trucks will not get through the archway there, even if that was desirable to have them driving on the cobbles there. So what do we need to think about there? Well, can we use an alternative mechanised form of transport to get materials and equipment from the roadside into where they're needed, or might we need to hand barrow materials into the site? Each of those is going to add cost to the overall project. And then just think about things like a bridge. Ancient bridges were not designed for modern transport, so they might not be able to carry that load. So if that happened to be the only way into the site, then we might have to think about another method of getting all that kit into the site. Now, the height and the shape of the building will all add cost. So if you imagine building a square building, a rectangular building, you essentially have 4 right angles and 4 straight lengths of wall, relatively easy to build. But the more often you put another turn into the construction, the higher you build, the more scaffolding is needed, the more complex the scaffolding. So anything that adds that complexity in will add cost in. Right angles, relatively easy to build. Straight lengths of wall, relatively easy to build, but start to build curved walls and non-right angles, and you're adding complexity and adding cost. The size of the building as well will have an effect. We'll all be familiar with the concept of economies of scale. So the more you buy, the bigger discount you're able to negotiate. And that's true in these sorts of projects as well. In addition to that, you can get more tradespeople on site at the same time with a larger building. So scheduling them in one after the other is much less complicated than in a small building. So for a smaller building, you can't get the trades in the order that you want them. You can't. It would be difficult to schedule them in at the time that you want them. So the net result of that actually is that a smaller building seems to be disproportionately more expensive than a larger building. And then thinking about the availability of materials, the nature of the construction. So as an example, flint buildings, now they're commonly built in Suffolk, Sussex, pockets in other places. But the people that actually build with that material, flint knappers, are quite few and far between. So being able to commission somebody at the time that you want to do so will be quite tricky. So anything that adds a delay, adds time to a project is going to cost more. Now, if you have a listed building or a heritage building, perhaps in a conservation area, there will be permissions that need to be sought in order to obtain permission to continue with the project or start that project over. And again, this is about adding time into the process. So the permissions process, listed building consent, those planning permissions and so on, statutory consultation with various bodies, that all adds time into the process. So that will increase the costs associated with the project. Slight delay with the slide, but moving on then to the architectural features that might be associated with the property, and they can be internal or external. So as an example here, top image, we have some fibrous plaster. Now the cost associated with that actually is more in the way of the origination of the design. So in order to produce a plaster ceiling like that, you first need to produce a positive model, a carving of the frieze, for instance, if that's what you're producing. Then take a mold, and then you can cast as many of those as you choose. But the cost is all up front there in the design and the origination of that decorative feature. And then the quality of the finish, the quality of the materials, the quality of the craftsman producing that work to produce good, crisp designs, carvings and so on takes decent material and good quality craftsmen. And of course, they come at a premium. So moving into the slightly more mundane, it may be that there's asbestos in your client's building. Now, if there were a fire, the removal of that contaminated debris would require a licensed disposal of that asbestos. So that will add to the cost. It may be that we need specialised equipment or specialised services. So an example of that might be the need to put in a temporary road structure to facilitate moving heavy duty kit into the site. Building regulations may have a part to play. So in particular, Part L, which is related to thermal efficiency. There may be some types of building, and I'm thinking here about a timber pavilion, for instance, or a scout hut, something like that. We don't believe that modern building regulations will permit those to be constructed in the same way that they are currently. So what we're looking at there is producing a value for simple masonry building to be put back. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what building regulations will look like if and when there's a fire, but we're intending to try and cover that eventuality with our valuations. There may be some localised issues, so local permissions around road closures, suspension of parking bays, something like that, to allow your building work to proceed. And it should be noted that the building sum insured should include all outbuildings, hard landscaping, walls, everything in fact that falls under the definition of the buildings. Now, no project will be able to go ahead without the involvement of one or several of these types of professionals, be it architects, surveyors, engineers, and so on. So it very much depends on the nature of your customer's building as to which of these professionals might need to be involved, but they certainly need to be factored into the valuation. VAT is something else that we'd need to reflect in the valuation. The sum insured must reflect your client's relationship with VAT. So if they're VAT registered, there is no need to insure the VAT element. They can recover it. If VAT is not recoverable, then it must be included within the sums insured. Now, there are a couple of caveats to that. So HMRC define a couple of things: relevant residential purpose and relevant charitable purpose, where the building works can be zero rated. Fees and demolition still attract VAT. But if your customer falls into the definition of relevant residential purpose or relevant charitable purpose, then those the building works can be zero rated. So as you might imagine, relevant residential purpose relates to dwellings, but also to, for instance, boarding houses in schools and residential care. Relevant charitable purpose, simply being a charity doesn't mean that the building works could be zero rated. It does depend on what their purpose is. There's detailed guidance on HMRC's website, but suffice to say that is a complicated subject, and your clients should seek advice from their professional advisors about whether they should be including VAT within their sums insured or otherwise. Just covering off where we get our sources of information from. So we work very closely with Gleeds, who provide much of our costing information, also with a building cost information service, who are the sort of nationally recognised body for providing this information. We certainly review claims costs and look at loss adjusters reports and fees related loss adjusters reports and their claims costs relating to live claims, and we certainly always discuss with conservation bodies whether a building could be put back in a particular manner. So we try to understand what their thought process might be when it comes to putting buildings back. So once you've set your sum insured, it's important that the figures are kept up to date. This is usually done by a process of index linking. The ecclesiastical, we generally refer to three particular indices: the House Rebuilding Cost Index, the General Buildings Cost Index, and the Ecclesiastical Heritage Index, which is a bespoke index designed to track the cost of rebuilding heritage properties. Once you've set the sum insured and providing your keeping us informed about any extensions to the property, then the building's sums insured will be index linked. But it's important to review that formally every 3 to 5 years. So don't rely on index linking to keep those figures up to date indefinitely. I'm just going to hand back to David to summarise the discussions.
Thank you, Claire. So just reflecting back on the objectives that we set for this session, you should now have some extra insight around why it's important to set the correct sum insured for buildings insurance and the things to discuss with your clients when contemplating an appropriate building sum insured. We've explored ways of keeping the sum insured up to date through index linking and the limitations of index linking over an extended period. So as Claire said, it's important, notwithstanding valuation and index linking, that the values at risk are periodically reviewed at a sort of 3 to 5 year interval. And as we've said, if there are any adjustments to properties along the way, so extensions and alterations, the building sum insured is reviewed to reflect those changes. And we've talked about the various ways that ecclesiastical can support you and your customers when it comes to valuation and selecting an appropriate sum insured. So we've talked about both the remote desktop services that we offer and the more traditional on-site survey and valuation support that's available to some of our policyholders, subject to meeting our qualifying survey criteria. So thank you very much for your time, everyone. I hope you found the session of interest and value, and we look forward to speaking to you again at a later date on further topics. But as a final topic or issue, just to flag, in terms of valuations and our offering, we have a lot more information available on our website, which is on the slide here. It is a value add. It is unique to ecclesiastical. It's part of our wider risk management proposition, and we have support around other risk management issues, so fire safety, security, and health and safety. Our panel of risk professionals are on hand to support policyholders via our risk advice line, and we have a number of preferred suppliers that can support us and support your clients around common risk management issues such as electrical inspections and asbestos surveys and the like. And again, those details can be found on our website. Thank you very much.
It's too good to be true.